We're here to discuss with you any questions you may have, some insights that we also have from a reviewer standpoint. What we'd like to do is have basically as free form as possible.
This is the freest form you've ever been to today, trust me.
Freest forms?
Yeah, because Cyrus and I actually do podcasts together, and we riff ridiculously, so yes. We apologize in advance, but we're sorry and not sorry.
At the same time.
Exactly.
So if you have not met him yet, this is my very good friend. I've been friends with him for a number of years, Mr. Jeff King. He runs a little tiny podcast which covers everything you could possibly imagine from the geek world called Us Geeks. Included with that, he also has his hands and fingers on many pies. You have your hand on a pie, in a pie. And he is also doing very well in professional voice work. So, you know, if you ever give me a call and you hear his voice, I paid for that. Okay, you introduce me, make me sound awesome.
This is Cyrus. This is my good friend Cyrus Kirby. Like you said, we've been friends for years, and if you were here for the promotion video, a lot of the stuff that I talked about when I was early on, like the Rochester Gamers community, the Gamers Reunion, stuff like that, Cyrus has been there through all of that with me as well. So we have been friends for years. He runs, of course, Father Geek, and I'm sure I don't have to say what Father Geek is, but you know what? I am going to anyway. Oh. So Father Geek is this awesome blog. I've always been very proud of my friend for what he's put out into the world. And that blog, of course, looks at games and reviews games from three perspectives: the gamer geek, the parent geek, and the child geek. And it has grown leaps and bounds. He's a very respected reviewer. You know, we talk about the Father Geek seal of approval early on, and personally, it's been really cool when somebody sends me a game to review, and I pull it out of a box and I see it already has the Father Geek seal of approval on it. That kind of makes me smile a bit, and then probably also means I'm probably going to at least get a decent game out of it as well. And I'm not going to be too disappointed. So that is Cyrus. He is an awesome dude, a great father, and a great reviewer. So there you go.
He did a much better job. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I also hear that a lot on our podcast.
Yes, you hear that too. One thing we'd like to do right up front, if it's quite all right with you, and I'm sure it is, again, we have this other project that we have two bald geeks where we go back and forth with, talk about horror movies. That's our other passion. We get way too many passions. In there we have something like we call the top two. And the reason why we only have the top two is because we don't want to bother with the top 5, top 10, what else have you, because let's be honest, the only thing that really matters is number 1 on the list. However, because there's only 2 of us in here, we both want to have a say in. We actually agree on most things, but we like to say that it's just the top 2 we're going to do here. So we are going to give you our top 2 things as reviewers we really wish you would not do.
Also, this is very much like our podcast in that Cyrus told me we were doing that a little bit before we came in the room. So
time to think about it.
Yeah, so I usually don't have time to think about our tops. So what do you got?
All right, so number 1 thing for me, as a reviewer, please, 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 please do not take giving a bad review as a reflection as you as a designer or as a person. It is very difficult at times to separate that which you've been working so much time and energy on with information people are giving back on that. It is not about you, it is about the game that you're providing. You need to be able to separate yourself when you give that game up. You have to make sure that's like that little baby bird. You taught it how to fly, you taught it how to eat, you taught it how to sing. Once it leaves your nest, you have no say. I have always tried to the best of my ability, deal with any and all reviewers when they come back to me and say, I think you really messed up and you're not being fair. I will go out of my way to make sure they understand what happened, why we're reviewing it this way, and what it means. If you are going to pass your game to somebody, be prepared to get the worst news. If you are not, don't give it up yet, because the game is not ready to be reviewed. Not because it's not great, not because it's not strategic, not because the artwork isn't fantastic. It's because you are not ready. That was deep. Go ahead.
That was deep. Actually, I want to kind of bounce off of that a little bit too. You know, as reviewers, we kind of start building relationships in the industry as well with people that design and publish and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people that I consider good friends of mine. And I guarantee you that when somebody sends me a game that I have a relationship with, I'm as nervous as they are to sending it to me, because the last thing I want to do is say something bad, or some creation that a friend of mine has done and I may not like. But at the same time, we pride ourselves, and I know Cyrus does as well, on doing an honest review. I will never rip on a game. I'm not out there to trash a game, but I am going to be honest with my feedback. And I always hope, kind of just as you kind of said, if I have to get in that situation, and I've been pretty lucky not to have to do it too many times, that at the end of the day, the person that I've been working with understands that that relationship still exists. We're still friends. We don't have to agree on everything. I've got friends that don't listen to my podcast. I'm all right with that, and it goes both ways. Podcasts aren't for everybody. Games aren't for everybody, and it may not ring with me this time around. It doesn't mean your next game won't. It doesn't mean that you're blacklisted from my review list, and hopefully I'm not blacklisted from your review list. Now, if it happens 5 or 6 times, clearly you're not making games that are in my wheelhouse, maybe. So maybe you do go on, and you know what? I'm happy with that as well. I actually want people to do the research and make sure that they're sending games to people that they have a shot of getting that positive review so getting it to the right groups. So now I guess I've expanded on yours. I got to do my number one, huh?
Oh, yes, please.
All right, give me a minute. No, just like the podcast. I two keep popping in and out of my head, and I got to figure out which one I want to go with. So I'm
both.
No,
You got 2 hours.
don't tell me what to do.
You got 2 hours.
I'm going to go with. I think I'm going to go with contacting me. Hey, I need this review tomorrow, or my Kickstarter is got 2 weeks left, that kind of thing, and not respecting the policies I guess I have in place. So there are situations where I can help with that, but that is the only place that I have a fee around reviews. Is if I got to start rearranging my schedule and other people's schedule, then we have a rush review fee. And I've had people either that, again, I've had relationships with, or I haven't, and they're just contacting me out of the blue, kind of go, but I don't have any money, I can't pay you, I can't do this, I can't. Well, I'm sorry, the 2 other reviews I have that week and the week after or whatever that contacted me 2+ months in advance and all that stuff, I'm not going to try to shift those around. I'm not going to try to get you in place because you decided that this last minute non-planning thing is an emergency for me. Because it's not. The people I work with, and I try to accommodate as many people as possible. If you were here for the promotion thing, I really hate saying no to people. I really do. But I've put policies in place because of how flexible I used to be and how much time I gave up trying to help every single person that came to me. And this is just one way for me to say, look, please think of me in advance. That's what my rush fee is all about. Please think of reviewers early in the process, not at the very end of the process, and that's the only reason we ever started charging anything. So that's probably my big one. It's like, hey, I need this in the next 2 weeks, and yeah, I can't pay you, but can you just still do it? I mean, you're a reviewer, right? You need content. Well, trust me, I have a tub of games at home. I don't need content. So that's the one I'm going to go with.
Very good, very good. Any questions or comments on what we've said so far? Here, crickets.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, yes, sir.
Go for it.
So are you planning on putting on a Kickstarter?
So, and let's make sure we repeat the questions for the
So let's hypothetically, and let me know if I got your question right. Let's hypothetically figure out, when do we get a game reviewed, whether it is before the Kickstarter or after the Kickstarter?
When in the Kickstarter process should
When
you
in the
get your
Kickstarter
Kickstarter
process? Is that right? Okay. Do you want to answer that, or I can?
We both can.
Okay.
That's the thing of a panel. I
Oh,
mean,
we
what
both
if we don't agree?
Well, that's true. Well, may I go first? I'll
Go for it.
You should get that game reviewed as soon as you think it will properly reflect that which you are going to be showing on the Kickstarter. Then you should have it reviewed after you have it successfully published. Because you're only going to have a small group of people who are looking at it from a Kickstarter perspective. And then once you start publishing it, you're going to get some more contacts, and you're going to start pushing it out again. You'll probably continue to have it reviewed. The more times you get your game reviewed, the more times other people are learning about it and seeing it. That's why the reviews exist in the first place. Not necessarily to see, like, I'd like to get some feedback so I can change that same design. You really can't. What you're trying to do is get that word out over and over again. So you want to do it first to get people drawn into the Kickstarter, and you want to do it again afterwards so people can continue to buy all of the extra copies that you made because of all that additional money that you got in. Right? So nothing hurts more than having product taking up the garage. Right?
To me, there are a couple of different times during the Kickstarter process you might want to do a review. And actually, you'll want reviews at all of these steps. And you'll want to plan them out and work with the reviewers for when they're going to come out. Now, you might have some that come out just before to kind of start generating a little bit buzz. And then also, it's something that you will have that you can use on your Kickstarter page right away. So having that third-party validation right away is always a good thing, especially if this is your first time. So if you're a first-time publisher, designer, first time on Kickstarter, that third-party validation really helps. The other time that we sometimes work with somebody on is that mid-campaign thing. Now, this again is not somebody contacting me saying I'm already into my campaign. It's contacting me ahead of time, and we've planned together that my review will come out in the middle of your campaign. So maybe they've got the 2 or 3 already in place that they were going to launch with, but now with that mid-level slump and all that stuff that people talk about, this gives them additional cannon fodder, like I like to call it, update fodder and stuff. Say, hey, look, a new review came in. So you're talking about the game some more. You've got another opinion out there. You've got another channel that's talking about your game during a time when maybe you're, again, that mid-level where you're kind of slumping off a little bit until the last 48 hours. So those are 2 times. And then I agree with Cyrus, too, that after the campaign, I get games in that aspect as well, where somebody's like, hey, this is actually, we're just getting them in, we're sending them out to backers now, this is going to hit retail in X number of days. In that window somewhere, can you get us a review of the final product? So those are the 3 I would say.
Excellent. And the idea is to always kind of take that money that you just got from your first published game, roll it into the next one.
Dusty?
So to review the game with the prototype component-wise, which was typical for the Kickstarter, because very seldomly do you actually have the final components there, because you're still trying to get the money to produce them. And then after the fact, where you do have it, in my opinion, yes, because the first one is to get interest. You're trying to get as many eyes on your Kickstarter as possible, so they get interested in the game. And as Jeff already said, getting that third party to say, here's what I think about it, is fantastic. If I were just to walk up to you and say, I got this great game, and here's a picture of it in my wallet, can I have $40? It's not going to work very well. But if somebody that you knew, or at least knew of, said, yeah, I played too, it's not bad, you should think about it. Well, all right, things are starting to get a little bit easier in your brain to what kind of decision you make. And then afterwards, because now your game is done, and you really want to show the world, this is what we put out. This is what I'm capable of. I want you to get excited about that which all these other folks helped me make. They got a copy. Now I want you to get a copy too. There are very few reviewers that I know of that are willing to play a game twice. They may do an update and say, like, well, now the components are changed. Well, I myself will not play it twice. It burns out my groups. So new folks, but that's good, because you do want different perspectives, and you can use the perspectives of those reviewers who gave you their thoughts on your game during the Kickstarter.
There are enough reviewers out there too that you can go with other reviewers if you want to as well.
We're dime a dozen.
Yeah, we really are. But the good ones get the full dime.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Get the 12 cents.
So, you can kind of plan for that as well. And again, it's still getting the word out. Hey, my product is not gone. Guys, it's actually finally here for everybody else. and that's where you kind of want that review perspective. So there are, I mean, Cyrus is right. There aren't a lot of people that will do a two-prong review, or review something twice. They might do the update or something like that. Depending on who I'm working with, I will. Again, it depends on if, hey, these things came with it because of the, Kickstarter, and we got new components, and here's a new piece of gameplay and that kind of stuff. Especially if they want a video from me, because our videos, we have the game playing in the background. So I'm going to play it with the new components. So in that aspect, if somebody's sly and they say, hey, this time, can you do a video for me? Yeah, they kind of know they're getting another play out of me, if I agree to it.
Which is not bad. Ask.
Yeah.
Ask. I mean, they'll be very straight with you. They'll say yes or no, in which case, make a decision.
I don't feel cheated if somebody asks me that.
No, I never feel not cheated at all. Any other questions before we move on?
No, anything?
No?
All right.
What's your current lead times on, are we still sticking to like the 2 months out thing, or is it longer? Because sometimes I know you guys are even farther out.
It's a horrible question to ask. So let me go ahead and restate the question. What is the lead time for giving a game to a reviewer and then expecting a review back? For me, if you give it to me, I promise I will review it eventually. I have 98 games in my queue right now. For those Kickstarter games, I am willing to negotiate time. So they will actually get priority placement as far as the games. Every game goes in my queue and it slowly bubbles up all the way to the top. But I also let all of my players choose the games that they want to play. Because the dirty little secret about File a Geek is I actually don't do a lot of work. My job is to make sure that I have a lot of people playing your game a lot of times. And so I have to set up all these different groups logistically to make sure it's out there. And sometimes they're sick and tired of playing X amount of euro or how many party games. Want to keep it fresh? So you say, go pick a game. Here's a description of each one of them. And so those will be elevated up to the front, and then we'll go ahead and play it. But once it gets played, for me, once it starts getting played, it'll be out the door in 2 weeks.
For us, it's a little bit different, and it is roughly our policy. If you want to stay outside of our rush review fee, which again, I'm all for that. I would gladly not take a dime as long as you stay within our policies. So we changed it a little bit here recently, and the policy is that we need 2 months contact time, at least 2 months. So 2 months prior, you're talking to me about the schedule. And that way I can look at my schedule and tell you if I'm even able to do it. And we actually have a contact form on our website that asks everything I need to know, player count, that kind of stuff. And then I will look at my schedule for recording, whether you want it on the podcast, whether you want the video, whether you don't care, it could be either, that kind of stuff. And then the number of players, do I need to get some people together to make sure I know I got enough players to look at it and form a good opinion, that kind of thing. I'm usually the one that does all the teaching in our group, so I also got to make sure I have time to read through the rules, read through them again, screw them up once and read through them another time, that kind of stuff. So I like that 2 month window to kind of make sure I can look at everything else that's going on, and then I expect the game a month prior to the date I've agreed to record it. So that's not the date it's going to be out the door. That's the date that we're recording the podcast that date, or I'm recording the video usually that weekend. I usually do videos on the weekends, and our podcasts are every other Tuesday that we record. So those are things that I look at. So I want it a month prior to us having to do anything with it. That way, again, I have the actual thing in my hand. I might have looked at the PDF for your rules or something early, but having the actual game, reading through it, thinking I understand it, pulling out the pieces and going, oh, I clearly read that wrong, and being able to look at it again, it just gives me that time before I have to go to the group and say, okay, here's the game, I'm going to teach it to you, and let's go with it. And we also sometimes do things like, we had one review that we actually had the designer on Facebook speed dial, basically. He was sitting in Facebook Messenger with us, and we were going back and forth. Well, what about this? What about this? And there was actually at one point he was like, well, we were thinking about changing that this other way, and we're like, don't do that because we broke the game that way. You know, so if we have a lot of questions, we'll try to get a hold of you as well. Again, we will do earlier than that, but then you start looking at our rush review fee, which is reasonable. At least I think so. A lot of people seem to be fine with it. A lot of people do pay us. Sometimes I wonder if I should raise it so people, again, the whole reason we put it in place is so you'll think about us early. And then there was something else I was going to say, and I completely forgot what it was. Sweet. So timing.
So say,
And
that's
then,
all I have.
and that's all I have.
Very good. Any other questions?
Oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Very good.
As of today, though, I can say that, I mean, we have a two plus month lead time. I have already booked some things January through April. I mean, so people are starting to get a hold of us early enough to kind of do it. So I already know there are dates, like January I think is done. I can't do anything more in January at this point, stuff like that, so. Yes, sir.
So you kind of answered half of a question I had, and that is, are there certain games that you're just tired of reviewing, or you see just so many of them? Alluded to, another Euro war for Christmas or something. You'll prioritize that lower because there's other ones that come along. Are there certain holes that you see, certain gaps that, I wish I would be getting more games like this. I want another time travel game, or I want another something that you guys would be excited to review that. It's more unusual.
So are there any types of games, thematic or mechanical wise, that are what we'd really, really be excited about to play? Okay. For my part, it's really whatever the folks want to play. I'm going to sit down and play whatever is given to me. I have yet to sit down and really dislike a game to a point where I'm foaming at the mouth. I've played games with Jeff where it's like, I don't want to play this ever again, and then it turns into a thing.
That's actually a bonus for me.
Yeah, because I just didn't enjoy it, and I know there's other games out there. But and the more folks that you speak to are in the reviewing world, you're gonna see that they all have their own way of going about this. We're not given a book, on day one. It's like, I understand what I need to do now. So for my group, if it ever start getting burned out, I may have 4 or 5 of that same type of game sitting on the shelf. I just put those away for a while, because it's important to me that every game be placed on the table and be given the most fair opportunities possible. So if my group is already coming in and they say, what kind of game is this? And I say, well, it's a Euro shooter with cows. They're like, again? They're not going to want to do that.
What kind of games are you getting?
Awesome games. Awesome games. Awesome games.
Get on that list.
So to answer your question, just in a very slightly, probably more direct way, there's always room. It just might not be the right time. That's it.
Yeah, I will say, so again, this kind of goes back to researching your reviewers, because clearly if somebody said that they hate party games, don't send them a party game, right? We have a hard time getting into rock, paper, scissors games. So those are ones that we try to tell people up front, look, you probably don't want to send this to us. We don't like, for the most part, unless I pull in my fiance who helps us with the video reviews from time to time, things like drawing and memory, those kind of things aren't up our alley usually. That said, in general, unless I really get a bad vibe off of it, and if I'm on the fence, I'll kick it over to my partner and say, what do you think? And if he goes, oh, no, then I know, but if he says yes, because it always surprises me when he says yes to something if I'm on the fence about it, we'll go ahead and take a look at it. And we have been surprised before. I mean, there are games that we kind of thought, well, okay, we're on the fence, but we'll take a look at it. Thematically, I'm one of those people that I don't think a theme is overdone. I don't care what it is. You know what? I'll play more zombie games. I'll just say it right now. I'll play more zombie games. I like zombie games. But there's got to be the game there, right? I mean, I don't care as much about the theme. Well, I mean, I like theme, and one of our things that we look at is the theme of the game and how it fits the game. That being said, if the game is solid and it uses a theme that everybody thinks is overdone, we don't care. we're looking at the game and the mechanics and how much fun we had playing it and stuff like that. So we don't turn away things that are like, oh, here comes another train game, here comes another, that kind of thing. There are some minor little things here and there, like my partner has some weird things that he doesn't like every once in a while, but it's usually like such a minute part of the review that I don't turn it away because of that, and I'll usually counterpoint it. And again, the other thing too, which is kind of nice, I think, for our review process is I have the ability to kind of look at a game for how it was made. So I'm not putting on my hardcore gamer hat when I get a party game or a casual game. I'm like, okay, this is supposed to be for a casual audience. Let's take a look at it like that. And again, if it's in that casual realm, that's usually where I'll pull in my fiance. She loves casual games. And so if it can get her seal of approval, then I'm willing to look at it from that perspective as well. So a lot of times the more casual games I might not do with my co-host. I might just save those for videos because my fiance will sit in on a video from time to time. So in general, you can pretty much send us anything and we'll kind of take a look at it. But I will let you know up front if I think it might not go over well with us. Because again, I want you to get your game in the hands of somebody. And sometimes I'll do that too. It's like, hey, have you reached out to Forrest Bauer, for example? He's a good friend of mine, and he does amazing video reviews. And he can do a lot of things. He does a lot of different games that may not fit in with what we do, but that is a good avenue for somebody else to go to. So I'll even throw a recommendation out every once in a while if we're not going to accept it. Mm-hmm.
Answer the question fully? Okay. Any questions? Yes, sir.
This could go to things where he asked about good reviews, but I'm interested to hear if you get a game that you're giving a bad review for, what do you do to make that still be a valuable review? What do you do to put value into a bad review?
Okay, so how do we make a bad review something valuable? Something valuable. Well, first, before we answer that, let's very quickly discuss what would make a good review valuable. And what would make a good review valuable is that you cover all the points, you discuss the pros and the cons, and you give a final verdict about what you think. A bad review is the exact same thing. The only thing we're talking about here is just the outcome, as far as was the game well received or was it poorly received. What I would like to do is take your question and move it slightly over to a different area. How do you identify just a bad review in general? Not the outcome, just a bad review. Like, I can't believe I gave this person this game and they didn't really do anything. Those are pretty easy to spot because they don't spend any time actually getting to know your game, and it's easy to tell. You are going to know your game more intimately than anybody else. And if they just say something along the lines of like, yeah, I played it, it really wasn't my thing, I give it a thumbs down, that's a bad review because you're not learning anything from it other than one person's subjective opinion. Now, there may be a lot of people who read that person or follow that person because they're going to be deciding their own opinions based off what that subjective answer may be, in which case, shame on you, you should have been doing your research about who you're passing the review to, right? But if there is, in fact, a bad review that was given to you, you'll immediately be able to recognize it because they did not do it due diligence. Make sure you don't get your feelings involved. I mean, your game may very well not be their cup of tea, but did they tell you why? Did they demonstrate that they tried every in and out as possible? Did they come back and say, here's what I would or would not have done differently? These are all great things that you can take. Because while they may not necessarily say in great detail about all the things that they disliked, at least now you know that that individual took the time and they're giving you an educated opinion. At least they did the homework to say, this is the reason why I thought this way after exploring all these.
I would do a couple things on that. First of all, not all reviewers will do negative reviews, right? So make sure you know that up front. For instance, I believe my buddy Lance on Dead Viking, he won't do negative reviews. He will send your game back to you. And he actually, I believe he charges for reviews. And I believe I talked to him not too long ago, and he said, yeah, if I don't like it, I send the game and the money back. So that's his alley. So there are a lot of reviewers actually that basically the philosophy is this is a hobby for all of us, right? We're not really making bank up here, trust me. As much as game design isn't making you guys money, reviewing games is not making us that much money either. So we maybe cover costs from time to time. So a lot of reviewers will be like, this is a hobby for me, this is fun for me, I'm not going to spend my time on negativity. That's a very valid point for what they're looking at. How they handle that, though, like I like how Lance does it. He's like, if I know I'm not going to like it and stuff, I'm going to reimburse people, basically. I'm not going to waste their time, and I'm not going to keep their money. So we actually, again, we talk about how we like to do honest reviews, which means we will throw a unpleasant review out every once in a while. Again, my philosophy is I'm not there to trash a game. I'm not going to be one of those guys that, like, you know, put your game in the trash compactor on video or anything like that. For the podcast, we call those our in-depth reviews. We have 7 or 8 categories that we go over. In a negative review, we're still going to go over those 7 or 8 categories. It's kind of like what Cyrus said. We're looking at everything. What are the components? What are the mechanics? What are the theme? You know, all those things, fun factor, all those things. And we're going to go through each one individually on the podcast and say exactly what we did like and didn't like in a respectful manner, I'll say. And a lot of times when we get to something, we may even throw out, if it would have just done this, or maybe if this had changed. So we'll actually throw in some suggestions. Not that we know everything in the end all, but from our perspective. And I am a hobby game designer as well. So I mean, we're running Protospiel Minnesota in January. You know, I go to Protospiels. I help people test games. I design games myself. I do a lot less of that now because of this stuff. The review has kind of become my end of the industry now, and I've made peace with that over the years. But I do still have that mentality. When I'm looking at a game, there's a couple things I always try to keep in mind. This is somebody's baby. There's a person behind this. And if I was that person, what kind of feedback would I want? And so, again, on the podcast specifically, because we do have those 7 or 8 categories, it's very easy for me to kind of, I don't want to say clinically, because we laugh, joke, have fun while we go along, but we will say, okay, mechanically, here's what didn't quite work for us. Here's the piece that we loved, though. You know, so it's not going to all be negative. It's just going to be maybe the sum of all the factors ended up being something that, and we've actually had to say this a few times. After we've gone through everything, we're like, you know what, mechanically, this is the sound game. We can't find anything wrong with this game, but the theme or how they did the theme with the mechanics or something, that's why we can't recommend it. And a lot of times when I'm doing kind of that stuff, I'll tell people, look, this didn't work for us. Go check it out for yourself. Because like Cyrus said, at the end of the day, we're giving our opinion. It may be a well thought out opinion if it's done properly, but it's still our opinion, and that doesn't mean that you're going to feel the same about the game. So a lot of times, like if I'm doing for a Kickstarter or something else, I'll also say, go look at the other reviews. Go look at some of the other people. See what they had to say. Because maybe this registered with somebody else that's a little more in line with you. So that's kind of how we handle it. Jamie?
Have, by publishing negative reviews and being given backlash that is also negative from the designer of that game, caused us to pause and reflect and wonder why we are doing what we're doing? Yes. Again, as Jeff has said, this is a hobby. I don't get. Anytime you will be verbally abused from anyone, whether it's actually at your job or something that you just do, of course, it's going to make you stop and think, like, what's going on here? But we have to also pause and consider what my hobby is all about. My hobby is about being critical. And you are going to, every once in a while, run into folks who have a difficult time separating themselves from the product that they made. And that's okay, as long as the reviewer and the designer understand that they're not going to see it eye to eye. I've never changed my review based on someone not liking what I said. I have never not published something because their designer said, don't push that out there, you're going to hurt my game. I like to think that my opinion counts. but not to such a point where I hit submit and then the world says, okay, I guess we're never playing games again. They don't work that way. Is that to that?
Sure. I've actually been fairly fortunate. We've done some, negative is kind of a strong word to me, but we've done some reviews where we haven't necessarily been favorable. I haven't really received a lot of backlash for them. Again, that's always, especially if it's somebody I know, I always get really concerned about that. I also get kind of concerned sometimes, like if it's somebody I know and my listenership and viewership know I know the person, and it actually is a game I like, I'm like, please don't think I'm doing favoritism, because again, I do that separation. At the end of the day, I hope we're still friends. And if I love your game, then obviously we probably are. But I hope people don't take that the wrong way, because again, at the end of the day, we pride ourselves on being honest about what we think about games. And I'm hoping, I guess, and maybe it's a dream of mine, that because of, especially on the podcast, the way we do it and the steps we take, it doesn't come off as if we're necessarily bashing the game. At least that's my hope. I'm sure there's going to come a day. I mean, it's just bound to happen. Yeah, right? I mean, eventually you're going to kind of get there. But no, I've been pretty fortunate, I think, overall.
Yes.
Right.
But it would be nice to be able to actually have the product reviewed by someone who, an industry person, who actually can say, oh, well, your design, your mechanics are good, or your artwork is good, or if it's up to like production levels.
Okay.
Even though you're probably working with a prototype, before you actually make the jump to, oh, hey, here's my baby out in public.
Right.
Any chance?
So if you're looking at, is there a way for designers to get like kind of critical feedback, critical review prior to being published or being going to Kickstarter? Right. That's a great question, and there are some great avenues out there that aren't necessarily reviewer specific. But the Protospiel events, the Unpub events, those are great events for that. I cannot recommend them enough. If you've never, Protospiel and Unpub. Yep.
Which James is planning on bringing to Nexus.
Right. So Protospiel, if you don't know, is Protospiel. And protospiel.org is one of the main sites where you can see the ones that are coming up. Again, I'm actually running one with Matt Warden from Matt Warden Games in Minnesota in January. There's one in Madison, there's one in Milwaukee, there's one in Chelsea, San Jose. Yeah. So I mean, just check out the site. I can never recommend them enough. I mean, those events are great. The main difference that I've kind of seen, I've actually never been to an Unpub, but still I highly recommend if you can get to one. The big difference I think I've kind of seen between the two is sometimes in Unpubs that some of the feedback I've seen back is that those are closer to being done. Like you might be actually looking for a publisher, but you're still not published yet. Unpub. Protospiel events are amazing to me anyway, because you can bring a game in anywhere in the process. I've played games that were created that morning and made solid by 2 a.m. that morning. And I played games that, you know what, this is coming to Kickstarter soon, but we want that last minute kind of, is there anything we need to change, and do we have, so the whole gambit, everything in there. And the nice thing about them is the people that attend them are other game designers, game reviewers, publishers, and it is focused feedback. In a weekend of play testing, you're going to get more valuable feedback than going out in the general public and trying to test this with people that are going to give you probably feedback like, yeah, I wish this guy was blue. You know, that kind of thing, where you're actually working with individuals that are like, you know what, this mechanic and this, but here, I understand this is where you're having problems. Here's 3 or 4 examples of maybe how you can fix it. And I don't know about, how many people have attended Protospiels? Awesome. And I don't know about the rest of you, but whenever I kind of come out of a Protospiel, I'm on a design high for like a week. I mean, there's so much that comes out of it, not only testing my own stuff, but testing other people's stuff and seeing how other people go about it and seeing how other people give them feedback. Just gets me going to a point where, like, for the next week, I'm like, hey, I gotta create 5 new things, you know? So those events are very much all about that.
Just one thing, when I went to a couple of Protospiels, one of the things that I noticed, maybe from a selfish perspective, is you're also expected to play other people's games.
Yes, you are.
That's good, but, you know, if you really want to get your game played over and over again, from what I understand,
Unpub, you usually have, like, you pay for a table time or something like that. So you have that table time. Protospiels are usually a little more loose form, and you're right. And you are expected to play other people's games. But again, over a weekend, depending on the length of your game too, right? I mean, if you're bringing that 4-hour epic, you're probably not going to get that to the table too many times. But if you're in that sweet spot, that hour or less, or hour and a half and less, you can probably get it to the table many, many times if you want to. Again, just help other people out, and usually it's pretty much an honor system. Hey, we've just got done playing your game. Can you play my game, kind of thing now? And again, just the overall feedback you get from that condensed weekend is just immensely valuable to me, I think. All right, Cyrus, anything you want to say about it?
About those?
No.
I've never gone.
Do you know of any other?
No.
There are some playtest groups, I think,
Sure,
out
you
there.
can do playtest groups. See if there's folks around where you live. See if there's any small groups of designers. They usually get together and keep trying their own stuff and then break and then come back and do it again. A lot like a writer's workshop would be, except now for game designers. You can find reviewers who are willing to spend the time to look at your prototype and work with you back and forth. You look around, see if there's anyone who's go to BGG, Board Game Geek. Tell them I got this game. Here's the description. Is anyone interested in giving it a try? But I would suggest that you do go to Prospiel and Unpub, because what that gives you is the folks right there who are going to give you immediate feedback. And if you don't understand a word that they're saying, you can ask them to repeat it and rephrase, and then get it going. He tells me this horrible story where they were getting.
Why my story's got to be horrible?
It's horrible. This is why I haven't gone for ever. They figured out halfway or almost done through the game that they were doing something wrong and there was a better way to do it, so the guy quickly made a change, and then they reset the game.
Yes, we did. And that is something that you could potentially do at Protospiels, and I think that's an amazing thing. Again, you're sitting there with other designers and stuff, and it's one of those things like, I mean, we weren't almost done, but you get to a certain point, and if everybody at the table is kind of going, this is extremely broken, have you tried this thing? And if the person goes, I would like to try that thing, you actually try that thing on the spot, and you get that immediate feedback again on if that thing worked. And if it worked for that group, then you can take it to the next group that wants to play your game, or you can take the feedback at the end of that session and say, okay, that worked, but you might still need to tweak a couple things. You tweak things between the next group. I mean, to me, that's the great thing about Protospiels.
And you can't get that anywhere else, because if you gave me a game like that, and halfway through the game I'm playing with all my groups, and you send me an email like, oh, I'm sorry, you changed the rules. It's like, yeah, you're not getting a review.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and there are actually people that have sent me reviews or games to review, and I've looked at them and I said, you know what, I'm not reviewing this because I don't even understand how your setup works. And they've gone back and redid it, revised it, and got me new rules later, and then we had to re-talk about when I was actually going to be able to review it. But again, and I think that kind of goes, Cyrus had talked about reaching out to potential reviewers that you kind of maybe know are in that realm that want to do that kind of thing, but make sure you reach out to them. Please do not use reviewers as play testers without letting them know.
We'll give a review and we'll publish it, and they're like, but it wasn't ready. It's like, why did you send it? Yes?
How do you establish credentials as a reviewer?
Good one.
Yeah. How do we show the world we know what we're talking about? How do we basically let people know that our credentials as a reviewer?
Yeah. This one also kind of can be kind of twofold, because the other way I usually hear that is somebody trying to get into review, and they'll say, but nobody will send me games. So I haven't reviewed anything because everybody I contact won't send me a game because I haven't reviewed it. That whole, you need experience to get experience kind of rotation. So both sides of that.
Yeah, you need to, if you want to be taken seriously as a reviewer, review. But more importantly, find your voice. A lot of people do podcasts. A lot of people do videos, not as good as yours. And a lot of people do the reviews, they write them. We said it kind of jokingly, but in all honesty, reviewers are a dime a dozen. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone has some kind of medium nowadays that they can go ahead and say, okay, here's my opinion, I'm going to publish it out there. We have that luxury. But what it means for anyone who actually wants to be a reviewer is that you have to really put the time and energy into it. And that usually comes with basically bulk. If you have 100 or so videos, you can point to that and say, I know what I'm doing. And then publishing companies will start taking you a little more seriously. Designers such as yourself will start taking folks a little bit more seriously. You wouldn't just go give your game to your neighbor across the street if you didn't really know anything about them. The same goes with reviewers. You need to do due diligence, again, figure out who they are, what they're about, what the reach is, how many people can they do it, what their influence is, and then go ahead and work with them. But that all came from work from the reviewer's point of view.
Right. So, again, going back to getting asked, well, I want to be a reviewer, but nobody will give me games. If you're getting into game review, hopefully you're in it because you're a gamer, which means you have a game shelf, and you don't necessarily have to start off reviewing the latest and greatest. No. I think every successful game reviewer I'm aware of has started on their own shelf. Including us. We started pulling games off of our shelf, and those are the games we started reviewing. I've been very active in the Game Crafter community since the beginning of the Game Crafter. Really, I've been around and kind of been in that community forever. So we started doing a lot of games because the Game Crafter community was having problems getting games reviewed or finding a lot of reviewers that would do it back in the beginning. So we started doing those as well. And just kind of building from there. From there, we kind of, again, we started getting the volume behind us, and people started recognizing that, hey, these guys aren't going anywhere, first of all. And two, they actually are reviewing games. They're not disappearing. So you go from there, and again, through social media, through our own promotion and marketing and stuff, letting people know that we exist. We started doing Kickstarters, and now suddenly every once in a while, we work with various publishers and stuff like that. So it's just this kind of slow roll snowball effect that all started back from, I've got games on the shelf. I have material. I don't need to go out there, and the defeat is not, why aren't people giving me games? And I get that tantrum every once in a while, and it's really weird to me because it's like, why? I mean, I don't like asking. I don't ask for games. I don't ask anybody for games. I let people come to me because I feel weird. I feel weird if I meet you at a convention or something like that and go, hey, so you got a game. You want me to review it? Give it to me. It's just not my style. But if we start having a conversation and you find out I'm a reviewer and you go, oh, do you have room? That kind of thing. If it's a natural progression, I'm like, yeah, I'll take your game. That sounds great. Or if somebody invites me to a demo, a lot of times I'll kind of end it with, if that's all, they're like, well, thanks for coming and checking out. I'm like, did you need something from me? I just want to make sure that you got what you need out of me, and then by the end of that, I might walk away with a game because now they want to review, that kind of thing. But it's weird to me when new reviewers or reviewers trying to get into reviewing get mad right away because nobody is sending them a game. Well, show that you can review first.
Be consistent, do the work. Like everything else. You got your first job, you didn't walk into it and say, well, holy cow, you had a fantastic first day. Here's a raise. Didn't happen. Same thing with anything else. All right. Any questions? Yes.
Do you only review things that maybe are going to Kickstarter or that are self-published? Because I'm more interested in finding a publisher or maybe getting licensing.
don't know how to rephrase that question.
Do we review things outside of Kickstarter or already published, things that are scheduled to kind of go to market already, right? Do we review other things outside of those three categories? Is that kind of okay?
Yes. Yes. If you approach me and describe to me what it is that you would like to be reviewed and what the end goal is, when it's going to be available, we can certainly sit down and talk about it and come up with a plan. The only time I've ever turned down a game is because the game had to do with some very sexually suggestive material. I was like, there's no way I can get this in front of enough people to give it a legit review. I mean, I would have done the review if I had enough people, because that would have been a very strange review. That would actually an interesting one. I couldn't show any pictures for it. But there's nothing that you should not feel uncomfortable approaching the reviewer with that you think is within the limits of what you've already seen them do.
Yeah.
So I guess my point is that if you put a review out there and your fan base is looking, well, where is that? It's like, well, I'm still trying to peddle it to a publisher and it's not going to be available maybe ever. I don't know.
Well,
Do you want to waste your time on that type of review?
Oh, I see.
I personally, I guess I don't consider it a waste of time. Hopefully I'm not wasting your time in that aspect. If I know something like that up front, though, I'm going to say that probably on the tail end of my review or somewhere within my review, right? I'm going to say, this is a game that I know is not out there right now, but it's, it's looking for publishing. You might see it in the future, that kind of thing. That also might give me an opportunity for you and I to have a dialogue, and then once you're like, hey, I got picked up from here, so now suddenly I have something that I could talk about on my podcast. Hey, remember that game we reviewed? It is coming to publish, and here's what's going on with it, that kind of thing. So I have additional news. I agree with Cyrus. I mean, we will, again, it goes back to researching your reviewers, because not everybody's necessarily going to want to do that. On my end, again, if you've been in any of the other panels I did, I'm about community. I'm about my reason for being in the game industry is to share what's going on in the game industry and help people out as much as possible. That's my entire goal and why I got into this. I love the game industry. It's been a very positive community, and I want to give back. So from that aspect, I approach every review I do in me being able to give something back to the community. So I will review just about any game, like I said earlier. My only criteria is going to be pretty much at this point, first come, first serve, my schedule. Beyond that, my schedule, and then of course if there's a few things that I don't think will, again, resonate with me or with the people I'm going to sit down and play the game with, I want you to kind of hopefully find somebody it will resonate with. Other than that, we will definitely look at games from all perspectives, all levels. And I've actually asked my co-host a couple times. Once or twice a year, we kind of do this, are we on the right track kind of thing? And one of the things I wanted to know from him was, I know how I feel, but it's his podcast as well, and I handle the business side of things. He's there to kind of have a lot of fun, and this is kind of his release, his hobby. So I wanted to make sure that he was okay with all the stuff I bring in to review. Are you good with all the Game Crafter games that we get? Are you good with how many? Because once you start doing Kickstarters, that can be your entire world. Once people start getting used to you as the Kickstarter reviewer, there's no end in sight of how many games you could take off of Kickstarter. I mean, right there, you're pretty much, your content is there for as long as Kickstarter's around, probably. So I just wanted to make sure, I'm like, did he want to get back to, we only do published games, I wanted to make sure that, it was an environment that he was happy in. And he kind of came back and said the same thing. He's like, you know what, it's awesome because we're playing games I would have never thought of before. I'm getting surprised on a yearly basis by games. We pick games, because at the end of the year we always do, what was our favorite game we reviewed this last year? And we pick games that we would have never thought of 6 months earlier, that kind of thing. So he's in the same space, and I enjoy that aspect of it. So we will take a look at anything in the spectrum. I will say we used to have like we used to call it just our free queue, that you could just send us a game and it'll go in our queue and we'll get to it whenever. Again, Kickstarter threw that out the window for me. I've got a queue that I'm still trying to get to, so I completely got rid of that. And it is at a point now where it's first come, first serve. My schedule is my schedule. If I can get you in, I'll get you in.
One final point on that. If you do find someone who will want to work with you, make sure that you have an established website for your game. So when they review your game, they can point to it. Okay?
Or you as a designer. Doesn't necessarily have to be the game, but if you have a designer blog or something like that.
That's a good point. Any place where you can just point to where it highlights that game, whether it be a subpage or what else have you. And then make sure that you copy some of the content that they provided and link back. Is that while you won't be able to provide the readers the information, at least you now have that nice little back and forth between your website and review and the review on your website.
There's also a few reviewers out there, and again, this is all researching the reviewers you're sending stuff to, right? There are some reviewers out there that won't touch your game if it doesn't have a Board Game Geek entry. So that's something to maybe keep in mind as well. And again, that's research your reviewers and see what their criteria is.
I, for example, I'll add it. You send it to me and I'll see it, like, I'm going to add it for you. It's nice of me, yes, but it takes like 5 minutes. Don't worry, it's not a big of a deal. Any other questions while we're thinking of it? One thing I would like to really impress upon you folks, that while we are very nice people, reviewers are not your friends. Don't go speaking to them that they're your friends. They will have different ways of reviewing your content, but they have a job in the same way that you have a job as a designer. They are creating content for their base, and they are looking at your material as a means to an end in the same way that you were looking at them as a means to an end. Now, I make that sound very nefarious. I understand that.
Yeah.
But it is actually a very, very good working relationship. And again, if there's anything else that you walk out of this room with, understand you need to do due diligence with your reviewers. Review your reviewers. If you give it to the wrong person, you're going to be hurting. Because then you have to play with that PR nightmare for a while. And things don't go away on the internet. A lot of college kids are going to know this coming up very poorly. So it's, once you do find a reviewer that you can work with, be as open with them as you can about when you want the game to be reviewed, when you want the content out there, and then go away. Because we will contact you when we absolutely need you. Okay, and then if you don't hear from us from a certain time, and by us, I don't mean Jeff and I, because we're pretty good as far as correspondence goes.
Actually, you don't mean me, because this is one of those things that you and I don't agree on.
Oh, okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a good point. I forgot about that conversation.
Yeah, we've had this conversation.
We've had this conversation, ended in tears. The idea, though, is that you give them the game, and then they review it, and they'll let you know. Okay, some will come back and tell you, like, this is why I didn't like your game, just so you know it's going to be a negative review. Some folks will say, like, here's your review. It was nice working with you. You know, have a good time. You'll be able to figure that out with just talking to them. But don't forget one of your greatest resources, which is your peers. All your other fellow game designers have more than likely either worked with a reviewer or they know someone who's worked with a reviewer. See how they did it. Jeff mentioned a little while ago that, you know, working with a game crafter. I was up to the point where I started working with a game crafter, still reviewing, you know, games that my friends had and games that were off my own shelf. I was still trying to put in the time so I didn't have to knock in every single door hat in hand and explain to them who I was and why I was doing it. You know, I could write the whole thing out like a little speech. I said it so many times. The game crafter did for me is let me really work on my skills, because there were so many different games that came in. The crafter community is probably the most creative I've ever seen. And I work with creative people every single day. But I've never worked with folks who are more passionate and willing to take something out of the ether and put down something so solid that everyone can play it. That is very, very, very powerful. And it really kind of brought home for me what it was that I was doing. So while the folks from the Game Crafter got someone who was really passionate about reviewing their games, I got to use them as a means to really understand what it was I was doing and why it was worthwhile. You need to find somebody like that. Find someone who doesn't have a chip on their shoulder and wants the world to know.
Why is that coming my way?
No, I'll see it this way. It's this way.
Just checking.
It's this way. Find someone with a chip on their shoulder who's looking to make a name of themselves because they want to be the sheriff in town and shoot everything that kind of walks across the street wrong. Okay? There are viewers out there like that. But that's okay.
Unfortunately.
It's okay because there's a market for them. There are folks out there, again, who want to go and see a game get ripped apart. If you think your game can go ahead and stand that kind of heat, have at, because actually it's fantastic PR.
It's true. It can be, yeah.
Who do you remember when you put two people into the cage match, the guy that won or that poor bleeding piece of meat on the ground, right? That's a really harsh damage to put into your game, but they may be something that you want to do. Good way to go ahead and stress test it, not only the game, but yourself. You want to do that, right?
Yeah.
If you go just the other way, go speak to a reviewer who's way too soft or considered in the community to be too soft, it's not going to get the kind of impact that you're wanting. And you may not get that which you really need. You'll probably pet your ego like crazy until you're purring, but you might not get anything that really of value to take from that. It's like, what do I need to do with this game? So if you go with that, there's always some kind of Goldilocks right there in the middle, right? And if you have any questions about other people that you would like to speak to, please reach out to me. I won't speak for Jeff. I'm pretty sure you answer email. We know a lot of people who
I've been
do
known
this.
to.
We'll be happy to pass their names.
Yeah, that's one of the things that way early on there was a couple myths that got busted, and one of them I busted early on was that all of us reviewers clearly must hate each other because we're competition. Kind of like the same thing with gamers, and we don't. We're all really good friends. I mean, not all, but there's a lot of us that are friends. Not all. There are a lot of us that are friends, and we run in kind of the same circles, and we have those. And again, it's one of those things like we'll say, hey, I might not have the time, or it might not be a fit for me. But you know what? My buddy Forrest will do that, or my buddy Cyrus can do that. That kind of thing. We do know each other. We do kind of get a feel after a while for what other people might be more interested in. I've even done the contact for a few people. I was like, you know what? I'll check with him and see if he has some openings because I know the guys. You're hitting up cold, but if I really think it's a good fit for him, I'll hit somebody up and say like, hey, Forrest, do you have time for this? That kind of thing. So we are not. There is no Royal Rumble between game reviewers. And one of the things that Cyrus and I have all these conversations off and on because we are personal friends, in that I like to say that, it's their piece of the internet. That's something I say all the time. If there's somebody we end up not agreeing with, I always try to take a step back and just go, that's their piece of the internet. I have my piece of the internet. We can coexist. And that's kind of how I get through the day if somebody does something I don't agree with, that kind of thing.
I'm actually the hot-headed one.
Yeah. A little bit,
I'm
sometimes.
The one that comes up like, I'm so angry at this guy. It's like, shit.
Yeah. So where?
He actually does rub your head.
No.
Usually the ear. Usually the ear. Just like that.
Not like this. Like this.
Yeah.
With
the grain.
With the grain.
We're aware with the grain. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but a couple of things that Cyrus and I have slightly different philosophies on. Again, I go back to how much I inject myself, I guess, into the community, how much I enjoy the community. Cyrus, sometimes I think it isn't until, the last week or year or so where somebody knew who was Father Geek behind the name Father Geek, right?
Yeah.
It's like nobody knew who Father Geek was because Cyrus kind of wanted it that way for a while. He liked the brand to be up front and not his name. Where somebody like our buddy Lance wants the opposite. He kind of sometimes wishes he didn't go by Undead Viking because nobody knows him as Lance as much. Myself, I'm very much in the community. I'm very much into kind of doing the promoting and being the face of all Us Geeks. My co-host doesn't want to be the face, and I'm very comfortable in that arena, and I've been, again, part of the Game Crafter community since the beginning. I've done various things. I've booth monkeyed for Fantasy Flight. I've demoed for other people. I've run conventions. I've been there. So I like, and that's the piece that keeps me passionate about what I do, is interacting with people. So I actually do consider designers my friends. and like I said earlier, but it's the
I know a lot
job.
of designers that are friends.
Don't lie. This is not the place. So, I mean, I like building those relationships, but again, like I said earlier, when it comes down to review time, the relationship is the relationship, the review is the review. Just kind of like there are people maybe in your day job or whatever, it's like, I don't like interacting with them as far as work is concerned, but they're pretty cool when we get to the bar at happy hour. Same kind of deal. So, just kind of take all that with a grain of salt. Again, if I ever have to give a bad review to somebody, or if you send me a game and it's something that it might not be in my wheelhouse, just know that I'm upset about it in the back end. As much as sounds weird, I know it's not my game, it's not my investment, but I don't like doing it if I don't have to. But again, honesty. All right. Anything else? Anybody? All right.
Okay, one of the things if you want to pass a game to us and then have it mail you back, that's fine. Make sure you ask up front.
True.
Please don't ask after the fact, like
Yes.
you have it mail back.
I've had that happen, and it was really irritating. They waited until my review was out, had no idea I was supposed to send games back. Said, hey, my review's ready, here you go. And oh, that's great. You can't keep that. And again, I don't care either way sometimes, but we're not getting really paid for this. It's a copy of the game. And again, I think one of the earlier panels, way earlier today, I think, or maybe it was yesterday, was talking about how they sent out a $45, $50 game and that kind of thing. And let's be honest, I mean, that did not cost them $45, $50. I mean, especially indie designers, I understand that there is a cost and you are working on a budget, but don't try to snowball me in the fact that I'm aware of the industry. I actually worked in retail and everything else. I did some worked in a game store where we helped bring in games and stuff. So I mean, I'm aware of the entire process. So I know you did not make that game for $50 because we're selling it for $50. So it's just that's not if you break it down on a per hour basis of what Cyrus and I do, pennies at times, depending. So and again, I want to stress that we're, like Cyrus said, we're not against sending on games, especially the indie designers I work with. I get that there's only so many prototypes that they can make, and they're trying to line up reviewers. I'm more than happy if you pay the shipping to send it on, so that way you don't have to make a second prototype. But it does irritate me a little bit if it's on the back end and there was no conversation up front that this game was going somewhere outside of and Cyrus actually has some good stories about that, because a lot of times Cyrus passes those games on to people that play them for him if they really liked it. And if somebody asks him for a game back after that, he wasn't aware, that's an awkward conversation now, right?
Oh, it's an ugly conversation.
Tell
Ugly.
them you already put it in the shredder.
No, you're a horrible person. No.
All right. Oh,
Yes.
Obviously, when you are researching reviewers, do the due diligence, look at if they have submission forms, things like that. But are there any kind of standard procedures that you would recommend, such as, hey, if you do want it back, let the reviewer know in advance and provide return shipping? I mean, that's just a common courtesy, I would think.
you would think.
I would think, right? But are there any kind of standard things that you would expect, from people who are submitting something for review?
So standard, do we have any standard things that we
I know you have a checklist.
recommend from designers or publishers that are reaching out to us for a review? Go ahead.
I once had a checklist and quickly found that a lot of people don't adhere to my idea of the world. So I set that aside. A few things that I would suggest that you do to really kind of get the ball bouncing in a very positive way. If they have a contact form or list any kind of way that they want you to get a hold of them that way. Be as descriptive as possible, but as brief as possible about what you would like them to do. And the more information about the game, please include the title of the game. A lot of times I don't get the title of the game. I get questions like, hey, I want you to review a game. Is that okay with you? Depends what the game is. Let's learn more about it. Depending on how long the reviewer has been actively contributing to the community, they will be getting a few or 50, 100 or so emails in regards to asking people to review. So you want something like a resume to kind of bow over the top. They can see it and understand what needs to happen. Once they say yes, I will, more than likely, they will say something along the lines of, here's my information if you need to send it. At that time, say, great. I would like to not only send you the game, but also include in there money, so you would go ahead and send it to the next person or send it back. Is that okay with you? Okay. It's a step-by-step procedure. This is how email goes. Unfortunately, it's not a great way to dynamically communicate. They'll then either say yes or no. If they say yes, then you keep going. And then you've pretty much established you're in. You now have a sort of contract with that person, but you know what they're getting, what you're getting back, and they will be returning the information. That's how I would prefer to do it. Every reviewer has their own slightly different quirks, but in most cases, it is expected that the reviewer will be left the copy. Not so much as like payment, but as a courtesy for taking the time, here's your free copy.
Yeah, some people even, some people will say it in their policies. Some people just do it. It's not necessarily something that I require, but some people even go as far as like, here's your prototype copy if it's a Kickstarter or something like that, and we're going to send you a final version when it's all said and done. And that's another thing that you can consider. It doesn't necessarily, again, unless it's that reviewer's policy, you don't necessarily have to do that. Like I said, we don't actually have that policy. Every once in a while somebody does that, and it's kind of nice and it's kind of cool. And out of that, again, like we talked about earlier, I might take another look at the game then now that it's finalized, right? You sent me a copy that I wasn't expecting to get. They're not expecting me to do that, but it was a nice gesture on their end. It's a nice gesture on my end then as well. Again, like you said, you alluded to, I do have the contact form. Even people that I work with all the time and that kind of reach out to me and might have me on Facebook or something like that, or talk to me through Twitter, we might start the ball rolling there and have some conversation, but I'm almost always going to say, great, now can you go put that in the contact form, because that is where I will always go to search to see what did we say we would do. So I hate trying to do dates in like Facebook Messenger. Okay, I said I'll do it on December 1st, and then I go to my email and go, when did I say I would do that? If I didn't put it immediately on my calendar, which I usually do put it immediately on my calendar. But I just like to have it all in the email. And again, we might have this side conversation, have this, quick agreement, but at least in the email and using our contact form, now I know how many players is it, how much is this, how much time does the game usually take, that kind of stuff. When is your drop dead deadline for me to put this, that's one of the questions on my form. When is your drop dead deadline for me to have this out the door? Because that allows me to go back in my calendar. So even people that I work with all the time and that are friends of mine, I mean, some of them will call me. I have certain designers that will call me and stuff and say, hey, do you have room? Here's a, again, quick verbal agreement, but can you use the contact form? So that's my preference.
Yes, please don't ask us to review things on Twitter and Facebook.
It's again, the amount of stuff that we do, it's just like, okay, I know I've got a game coming up. When did I say I would do it? And where did I say I would do it? That's why I always go to my email and search it there.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
How many times will you play a game before you record a review?
Oh, that's a good one,
Good
too.
question. How many times will we play a game before we will do the review? So well, first of all, that depends on the game. If it's a very, very large game, we're going to be playing it fewer times than what we'd be playing a very, very small game, just because of the time that we've been allocated to actually enjoy that game and write a review on it. For my group, each one of the Child Geeks, the Parent Geeks, and the Gamer Geeks will be playing your game at least twice. Once to go ahead and play it and learn it and really understand it. The next time to go ahead and make sure that they got all the bugs that they're thinking going out. If there's time, they're going to play it more. If they really like your game, they will play it more. That's why it's taking about 2 weeks, because they got a lot of groups, and sometimes only that I can't get them all in one spot. And myself, I'm actually playing 2 or 3 games at the same time during 1 week, trying to make sure that the ball keeps rolling. That's for myself. You'll find that it's very different for every single group. However, what does your group do?
For us, it's going to depend a little bit on what type of review you're asking us for. So again, the podcast review is our in-depth review. So that we spend quite a bit more time on. So at least 3 to 4 times. Like I said, there have been times where we actually have either we're talking to the publisher, depending on how many questions we have, or the designer, or we're Facebook message or on the phone or something like that. So a lot of times we'll try to play it 3 to 4 times, not necessarily all at the same time, because we might want to break and think about what questions we had. Maybe I'll try to get a hold again of the designer and stuff, and then come back to it once we have those questions, and then see what we think. Because again, we're doing 7 or 8 different categories, and we want to be as thorough as possible when we do it on the podcast. The video reviews started because we got such a backlog on the podcast and people still wanted reviews. So what we call those is our initial impressions. So those we might play once, twice, 3 times. One of them is going to be what you see in the video, because we do a picture-in-picture. I have your game playing in the background. We're in the smaller picture saying what we think of the game. That is going to be our, here's what we thought of this game the few times we got to play it. Again, we're not going to hit on all 7 or 8 categories, but it's going to give you our feel, our thoughts and opinions of getting this game to the table. And again, we label those very differently. This is an initial impressions video. Here's our podcast in-depth review. Anything else? No? Good. All right. Well, again, if you guys have games that you want us to look at, just let us know. If you have any other questions that you think of, come ask us. I'm here for the rest of the weekend. I'm here through tomorrow's panel. And
I think I'm here tomorrow.
are you? All right. So let us know. Otherwise, we have business cards, all that good stuff. Or do you have your business cards? Okay, I have my business cards with me. Cyrus is unprepared. No. But FatherGeek.com. So again, thank you guys for hanging out with us and bringing up all the questions.
Yep, thank you very much. Thank you.